How the Light Gets In is the Institute of Art and Idea's unique festival, combining days full of talks and debates in philosophy, politics, arts and science, with evenings full of music and dance. Get your tickets for the world's largest music and philosophy festival at howthelightgetsin.org.
Thank you, and welcome to Being Human and Being Good. Most of us like the idea of being good, or at least being seen to be good. Or many of us think that being moral is an essential part of being human. And that's the question that we're going to be addressing today. Is being moral an essential part of being human? Because what we take to be good differs from person to person, culture to culture. Well, we have with us a very distinguished panel to debate this very salient topic. Simone Schnall is director of the Cambridge Body, Mind and Behaviour Laboratory. Rae Langton is the Knightbridge Professor of Philosophy at Cambridge and head of faculty there. And Joel Robbins is an American social anthropologist, and he's written widely about the morality in Papua New Guinea society. So, is morality just a story that we tell ourselves, or is it something that describes an objective set of rules out there? So let me begin, first of all, with Simone.
Is morality just a story? Absolutely not. It's very much part of the social fabric, the fabric of society. It is something that we process whenever we meet somebody for the first time. We do that within milliseconds. We decide whether, for example, somebody is trustworthy. So it's one of the first things we want to assess in terms of wanting to engage with a person or not, staying away from them. So it's clear, in my mind, it's not just a story. It's something very, very profound. And in that context, I'd like to refer some work that I find quite influential by Robin Dunbar. He's proposed what he calls the social brain hypothesis. And with that, he says that, for one thing, the brain evolved to keep track of social relationships, social situations, and more specifically, the people that we're close to, people that we can trust. And he proposes that language, in fact, evolved as a means of keeping track of reputations, keeping track of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who you should avoid, you should not engage with because they might be liars, cheaters, murderers, and so on. So he's basically saying that language evolved for the purpose of gossip. So gossip being the idea that as a community, we keep track of people's reputations. And I think nowadays, reputations are more important than ever, or they're more relevant than ever. If we think of the ways in which information now can be spread, so it's not just word of mouth, or you're whispering to somebody that, Joel has been up to some no good, right? I mean, and then of course, if that's the case, we all whisper to each other, and we might not treat them in the same way as we otherwise might. But now, of course, we all have that megaphone of social media. These pieces of information can spread in no time, and they can be quite destructive. So it's very much a reality. It's not just a story that we tell ourselves.
Thank you, Simone. Rae.
I agree with Simone that morality is not just a story we tell ourselves, though I do agree we do tell lots of stories to ourselves, and lots of our stories about our own moral motivations might be fabricated. But morality is not just about the social fabric either, and here's where I might part ways with Simone. It transcends both the social and it transcends the individual. So morality is the point at which we get to think about someone other than ourselves. We get to escape the prison of the self and think about what's going on in other people and what matters to them. And although Hilary mentioned that morality is different all over the world and there are many different moral practices, first of all, we need to distinguish what people take morality to be and what morality is. So what we take morality to be is one thing, and sometimes that might be mistaken. And what morality is might be another, and sometimes we might get it right, sometimes not. At some points, morality is going to involve factors that are common across many different cultures. I'll just mention, despite the agreement about many diverse practices, there are certain common threads. One common thread that is there in morality as it is, and in morality as a social practice, is a commitment to something like empathy, something like putting yourself in other people's shoes, something like understanding how things are from the viewpoint of someone else. That's there in Buddhist views about compassion. It's there in the golden rule that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's there, and that golden rule, by the way, has versions in nearly every major religion. Jesus wasn't the first to utter it. It was also there in Judaic principles before that, and there are versions of it in Chinese ethics and philosophy, Taoism, and elsewhere as well. And I'm no anthropologist, I'm a philosopher, but I do want to suggest that there is a common thread which involves a willingness to step outside the self and realize that other people matter in the way that we do. Now, it's sometimes called the golden rule. This gets to the second part of the statement, but I actually don't think it is so much a rule as a matter of a way of understanding how things are for other people. Understanding which begins with our friends and family and then goes further. Aristotle said that a friend is another self, and you can understand things that are going on with your friends and what matters to them, and you care about that and do things that are in their interests. That's where morality begins with people that are close to us. And in a way, morality is about expanding that circle so that that kind of understanding goes much further. It's not so much a rule as a kind of understanding which helps us motivate ourselves to do something more than we otherwise would do.
Thank you, Simone. Joel.
Thanks. So we've been asked an either-or question. Is morality just a story we tell ourselves, or is it a set of rules we have to follow? And I'm going to do a kind of old trick and answer yes to the either-or question. I think it's both. It is a story, and we do have to follow the rules. So the sense in which it's a story is that for everyone, their own sense of what counts as moral, as how you be a human being, as how you relate to others beyond yourself, is absolutely shaped by the culture they grow up in, the culture they live around, the stories that they're exposed to. Whatever intuitions they may have on a pan-human level, instincts or impulses, those only make sense to people through the cultural stories that they have, and they only know how to express them effectively to others around them through various cultural templates. We also know it's a story in the sense, the very broad sense we're using it, because it really does vary across cultures, and it can vary pretty extensively. So just to put some anthropology on the table, and we'd have to discuss it at more length what it means, but it's found in a lot of Papua New Guinea societies. There are 700 languages in New Guinea, so you can't generalize for everyone. A very strong view that you can never know what's going on in another person's mind. It's actually impossible, but it's also very unethical to try. And it's completely unethical ever to verbalize what somebody else might be thinking. And so certainly empathy, they're very strong on sympathy, on feeling for another person, on saying if I were in that situation, I would feel terrible, and so I feel bad for you. But if we take empathy to be feeling with another person, that's actually profoundly unethical there. And people, and we have studies of little children who do spontaneously try to do that, being taught, you don't do that, that's not something we do. So the differences go quite deep. So it is a story. The second half of the question, are the rules we have to follow? Most people in their own lives are, Hilary used the phrase moral realists. In their own lives, they think their moral rules are substantial and real and binding. They're binding in the sense not that you have to follow them, but that you know, and this comes back to Simone's point about reputation, that if you don't follow them, you will be judged for them. You're subject to evaluation. You have to orient to the rules are out there in your surrounding world in order to function as a social creature. You don't always have to be good. That's why gossip is interesting. But you do to be a social person and to survive as a social person, you have to orient to the rules. So they are stories. They are stories that we tell ourselves, but we also live with them as real, socially speaking, because that's how we make lives together.
Get your tickets for the world's largest music and philosophy festival at howthelightgetsin.org.